Alrighty, good morning, Miss Hoffman's class. So this is week 4. This is domain 11 of week 4. And the lesson is called Lewis and Clark, The Journey Begins. So we're going to start off right where we left off yesterday. So before they began their expedition of the Louisiana Territory, Meriwether Lewis traveled to Indiana to join William Clark and gather their team of explorers. Lewis explained, "As I wrote in my letters, Will, because of the United States government is paying for this expedition, we will travel as members of the U.S. Army. I asked that we be made co-captains so we would have an equal command over our men." Soon they traveled to the city of St. Louis, where the wide Missouri River flows into the mighty Mississippi River. St. Louis was a frontier town. Its streets and stores bustled with hunters and trappers who had chosen to live far beyond the more settled cities of the East. So trappers are people who hunt and catch animals to use their fur as clothing or blankets. The two captains knew that it would take courage, intelligence, and skill to reach the Pacific, so they looked for people who knew how to survive. In the forest and on rivers and mountains, these people would need to know how to hunt and fish for food and build shelters in which they could stay warm, dry, and safe. You see, there were no houses or hotels in the Louisiana Territory, so people had to be able to make their own shelter to sleep in. Some were Americans who had grown up in Virginia or Pennsylvania and who had later moved farther west to live in Kentucky. Others were Canadians from the country north of the United States who spoke French as well as English. The two captains finally put together a team of trusty men who were daring and brave enough for the expedition. Among the men who joined Lewis and Clark's group, one man stood out. He appeared before them one day, dressed half in manufactured clothing and half in animal skins, favored by woodsmen. "I am George Druid," he told them. "I hear you are going all the way to the Pacific. Ask the others you have already hired about me. They all know me. I speak French, English, and some Native American languages, so I can help with you communicate with your men and with many Native people you meet. I also know the hand signs used by the Native Americans who live out on the Great Western Plains. When different tribes meet, they use hand signs or sign language, since their spoken languages are not the same. I can ask them about the country ahead and help them understand that you have come in peace." So do you think from this description that Druid is going to be really helpful on the expedition? Lewis and Clark had to gather supplies as well as people. They were going to need to take a lot of things with them on their trip. They purchased some long and narrow canoes called pirogues, and one larger, wider boat called a keelboat, which is right down here. On the deck of the keelboat stood a little cabin that held supplies. Riders on the pirogues moved their narrow boats forward using canoe paddles, but the keelboat had a sail. Moving the keelboat was slower and more difficult than moving the pirogue. When a strong enough wind was behind them, it pushed the keelboat along. But if there was no wind, the men had to take turns pushing and pulling it with the poles and ropes. That looks like something heavy, right? All right. On Monday, May 14th, 1804, the explorers were ready. They called themselves the Corps of Discovery. Now, they would leave St. Louis and travel along the Missouri as President Jefferson had requested. As one of them, Private John Whitehouse, wrote in his diary that day, "We hoisted our sail and set our high spirits for the Western expedition." At last, they were on their way. Alrighty. So some questions to think about as we go into our craft for today. Imagine you were going with Lewis and Clark, and you wouldn't be home for many months. What kind of things do you think you would need to take with you? The people that Lewis and Clark chose to take with them on their trip had many different skills. Can you name a few of them? And why were those skills important? And finally, why do you think did the Corps of Discovery travel up the river instead of on foot? Alrighty, everybody, check in the craft for today.